Even when you're starting out, that sweet spot where you can hire high caliber permanent staff is very tough for a small business. The contract model just allows them to scale in a way that's sustainable for the business. That whole qualification process has to be super tight. A lot more companies that are open to having people based anywhere, which obviously can help with pricing and speed and opens the talent pool. The level of service shouldn't necessarily change. If we maintain that level of service, that just brings consistency across your brand.
Today, we are diving into the essential world of tech staffing, focusing on how flexible, expert-driven solutions are fueling growth across North America and Europe. Welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast, where we explore the strategic insights and innovative approaches empowering Canadian businesses to solve their most critical challenge, accessing specialized technology talent quickly and efficiently. Today, we are diving into the essential world of tech staffing, focusing on how flexible, expert-driven solutions are fueling growth across North America and Europe. In a competitive market, where the demand for skills in cloud, data, and AI far outstrips supply, finding a partner that delivers profile quickly and understands complex tech ecosystem is paramount. Our guest brings deep expertise in IT contract staffing and services, with a unique career trajectory that has spanned Toronto, Barcelona, and now back to Canada to lead a major growth division. Joining us today is Maurizio Gioffre, Director, IT Contracts and Services, Americas and Europe at Montreal Associates. Montreal Associates is a specialist technology staffing partner for innovative businesses and an official staffing partner for major enterprise systems like Salesforce, SAP, and Microsoft. Maurizio's mission is to deliver not just profiles, but partnerships that drive sustainable success. Today, we will discuss how contract staffing facilitates growth for clients, the future of tech staffing for smaller businesses, navigating digital transformation, MA's commitment to speed and quality, and the importance of continuous value creation for talent community. Let's dive in. Maurizio, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks, I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's pretty professional setup you guys got here.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to invite and discuss entrepreneurs as well as business leaders.
Thank you.
Your Montreal Associates, specializes in contract staffing and managed services in Americas and Europe, providing clients with rapid access to specialist tech talent. How do contract staffing and managed services accelerate growth and digital transformation for SMBs? And what are the benefits of using, specialist talent for short-term projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for different types of businesses, right? So if we speak specifically contract staffing, so Montreal Associates does permanent as well in various markets, but today for the purpose of this, we'll talk about contracting. There are certain small businesses. So if you look at a very small, say, consulting company, right? In technology, there's a lot of people who start out working as contractors themselves, and they go off and they grow their own business, right? And they end up winning more and more work. They make more relationships to a point where they need to actually hire other people. Even when you're starting out, that sweet spot where you can hire high caliber permanent staff is very tough for a small business, especially in like the technology landscape where pay is very competitive, right? So even if they can hire someone, are they going to be able to keep them, right? So what oftentimes these small boutique consulting companies will do is they'll start to look at contractors for time and material work to just help them for very specific things, to start to offload some of that work so that eventually, right, maybe they can hire, say, a junior person as a permanent employee that's more long-term. But effectively in that case, for a small consultancy, the contract model just allows them to scale in a way that's sustainable for the business that they're actually getting. That's one example, right? The larger consulting companies, it's not that it's not similar in a sense where they're trying to also like grow their workforce sustainably, but they usually have like a huge bench of people where if they win a big project, like they, for the most part, have the right people to staff it. What it'll allow them to do at a larger scale, because most of the times these consulting companies will have specific arms that are focused on a given industry or a given area of technology, and they got real solid teams in that space. But these bigger companies that are pursuing, say, more enterprise technology projects, there's always something else, like another piece of technology that is associated with the core project that they're working on. And if they don't have, say, a practice set up for that, they may not have the right person to actually take on that piece of work in conjunction to their core project. So what this contract allows them to do is to start to take on those other pieces of work in addition to their core focus of whatever the implementation migration project in itself would be. If you look at, so outside of the consulting world, in our world, we call them more end clients. So if a consulting company is like, say, one of the big four, an end client might be, say, one of the banks or insurance company or whatever, that type of company, right? They'll use contractors as well, depending on the type of project that they're working on. So sometimes what will end up happening is there's a new tech initiative where they're looking to implement a given technology to achieve some set of ROI for XYZ division. They'll get a whole bunch of CapEx, right? And the way that they want that to look, say, on their financial statements, sometimes it's a lot more advantageous to fit, say, all of that contract work into that CapEx budget. And when they use contractors, it's a little bit easier to do that. It makes a little bit more sense from an accounting perspective, right? So it allows them to offset things that way. It allows them to get access to very specialized talent that they don't necessarily need to keep in their permanent workforce forever, right? It allows them to bring in very specialized people who charge a lot of money for what they do, but they also bring that level of return, or they should anyway. And while they're doing that, if they need people in the future to maintain it on more of, say, like an OPEX budget, just as an example, right? They can hire more junior people who sort of get trained under those contractors, and as they phase them out, they phase them in. And it's just a little bit more of a sustainable way to do it. There's no, there's like a million different, use cases of how it can work, but those are just some areas where we see a lot of contract work working.
It's a very clear, analysis, Maurizio. It highlights that contract staffing is a strategic tool for agility and mitigating risk in high-demand tech areas. Now, let's explore how Montreal Associates is setting a new industry standard for quality and speed in talent delivery. Now, recently launched the Montreal Associates has really launched a new brand promise, committing to deliver relevant specialist profile within 48 hours for freelance roles and 5 days for permanent positions. This really, reflects a major dedication to client success. What does it take for a tech staffing firm to deliver specialist talent within 48 hours, and how does this speed and quality help clients achieve their goals and faster ROI?
Yeah, this is the number one thing. There's a few things, but number one is we got to be real honest with the client up front. So it takes a lot of discipline, not just at the recruitment level or at the sales level, but also the leadership level, to instill the standard that when you speak to a client, as much as some of them may need something really quickly and today, if you can't properly qualify what they want, or they don't understand that you know exactly what they want, right? Like that whole qualification process has to be super tight. Because at the end of that, if what they're looking for simply can't be found in 48 hours, you've got to tell them, right? You have to tell them, you have to tell them why so they understand, right? And if that's okay with the client, then at least they know, and we can make a bit more of a long-term plan to find them who they need, right? There was something that came up on our desk recently where what they were looking for can be found in 10 people in the entire world, because there was only one team that initially worked with the product. The product was eventually sold to another company and turned into something else. But this client wanted what they initially built, as an example, and there was only that group of people. So in a case like that, right, we have to be able to communicate with the client how realistic that is, right? But if we can qualify what they're asking for, right, and we say, yes, this is absolutely, we can do this, right? That's where we can tell them that, yes, like number one, this can be found in 48 hours. So when we commit, right, that's what that means. When we commit to saying, yes, we can run the search in 48 hours, we give it to them. That's the first step of how we can make sure we actually achieve that. The second part of that is our recruitment force, our sales force has to be more proactive than reactive. right? So using the time that we have day in and day out, networking with people that we know are valuable in the market and know will be good for something, even if there's not a requirement for these people today. Does that mean we shouldn't be meeting that person face to face for a coffee if possible? No, it means you should be doing that, because that's what creates a pipeline, so that when the opportunity comes, if you're a specialist, which all of our people are, whether it's in a given technology or an industry. So we have people who focus just on SAP, others that focus just in Salesforce, others that focus in just ServiceNow, others that focus in only oil and gas. Like, the list goes on of the specialists that work at our company. But if you are a specialist, you know what's in demand within your relative space. You should know who the big players are. You should be working day in and day out to build trust with those contractors, so that when you have something, they trust that you're calling them first, right? You're not just calling 10, 20 people and trying to send over 10, 20 options to the client. You're just looking for the best, maybe one, max two people. And if the contractors know that, they are going to trust and respect you. They will take your calls quicker than they take someone else's. And that all feeds into how quickly we're able to deliver a good profile for the client, right? It's kind of like a full circle thing, where if you build trust with the client, you can be honest with what can be found within a given amount of time, say 48 hours, they trust you, right? And if you're doing the work on the back end to build a pipeline of contractors day in and day out, it's a lot easier to provide the talent because it's already there. You're not really looking anymore, right? If you're always going back to the kitchen to try and find someone every time a requirement comes, you're never going to be able to find the right person in a week, 2 weeks. Forget about 48 hours.
Right. That's an impressive commitment, Maurizio. It's clear that this promise is built on operational excellence and a deep talent network. Now, let's discuss the future of tech staffing and how it's evolving to support small businesses. How is tech staffing evolving for SMBs, undergoing digital transformation, and how can new models make AI, cybersecurity, and cloud expertise more affordable and accessible?
Well, there's a couple of things there. If you want to talk about more accessible and cheaper, to be frank, it's not just SMBs though. This is like companies overall. There's always been places in the world where offshoring, for example, has been very common, and most companies are okay with that. But there's a lot of other places in the world too where it's maybe hasn't been as common in the past 10 years that increasingly have become very common, very normal, where companies who previously thought, we would never have anyone based out of there for whatever reason they probably have in their mind that made sense to them at the time. Now they're very open to that, right? There's a lot more companies that are open to having people based anywhere, which obviously can help with pricing and speed and opens the talent pool, right? All that stuff creates more competition effectively between independent contractors or options between staffing agencies that allows someone to perhaps be a little more cost effective in the way that they price things. If we look locally here in Canada, there's a lot of businesses, both small and big, that want people to return back to office. So I have a feeling that's, if anything, going to drive prices up quite a bit at some point, but only time will tell. I think the industry's already changing quite a bit. Like, I started 10 years ago, and the tools that are available now with different types of AI tools and whatnot were not available back then.
It doesn't exist at that time.
Yeah, it didn't exist back then. Now there's tons of tools. There's like an unlimited amount of tools that do all these different things. Some of them are useful. Some of them are useful. Others are, I would say, not useful at all. For me, though, I think what the tools that will really revolutionize what we're doing here are tools that more effectively allow us to go back to the basics of what made the industry so successful.
Hey, Canadian tech leaders and founders, are you struggling to fill key technology roles? Learn from Maurizio Gioffre, director at Montreal Associates, about their 48-hour talent promise, the future of tech staffing, and how to accelerate your growth through specialized contract expertise. Now let's continue our conversation with Maurizio. Now we will take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll dive into how Montreal Associates is creating real value beyond placements through its global talent community and thought leadership initiatives. Stay tuned.
Hey, you think you know UPS? Yeah, that's us. Everybody knows that. You know what you didn't know? This. Okay, try to keep up. Ocean, us. Ground, rail, air, so us. Guess who? Us. Customs cleared, borders cleared, done. Us. Still with me? Wait for it. Boom. Us. Intelligent, automated, fulfillment. Us. Yep. Healthcare too. Digital your thing? Yeah. Well, book it, ship it, track it. You feeling me yet? Yep. That's all us. That's all UPS.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue our conversation with Maurizio as we explore how Montreal Associates is strengthening its talent community and building lasting relationships through knowledge sharing and engagement. Now, let's look at how Montreal Associates is giving back to the talent community through thought leadership. Montreal Associates runs a podcast, called Careers in the Cloud, which is a great way to give value back to your talent community. Why is Careers in the Cloud vital to Montreal Associates' mission, and how does giving back to your talent community through content and networking enhance your ability to attract and place top specialists?
So Careers in the Cloud was started, I want to say 2021, probably. So 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
My boss at the time, Hemi Sabuel, big shout out.
Who is the host, sir? So your boss is...
I am now, but he was the OG host at the time, right? So he had an idea. He was my manager at Montreal Associates when he came up with this idea to launch this podcast, and him and I together, along with Kate Harding, our head of marketing, we all got together and we figured out, okay, what's the whole purpose behind doing it? Because it was more just like a fun idea of it would be fun to do that. Does it work with marketing? Does Emma even want to do it? But that's how it came about. And the whole premise behind the podcast was, in our job, when we work in staffing, you're on the phone all the time. You should be on the phone all the time. Right. In meetings, on calls, that should be most of your day if you're doing the job right. And because we had so many conversations with people, oftentimes some of those calls, you end up just like people ask you for advice, you give them advice based off all the conversations you have, right? I can't always give hard data, but I can tell you, like, most of the conversations I had this past month, this is sort of the result, and based off your situation, I think you can kind of take that to the bank and it might help you, right? So the whole point was just to maybe highlight or have some of those conversations on camera so that a wider audience could maybe take something from it, right?
Right.
Because it's really just the same thing. It was, if we could have our community listen to like half the calls that we have day to day, I bet you they'd probably learn something pretty interesting. Yeah. And that was like the fundamentals of where it came from. And it took off to covering all types of topics, where in the beginning we were talking a lot of just, people in the space who came from, I don't know, maybe who relocated from one country to another and what that journey looked like. Because there's a lot of people at the time who in our markets that we were working with.
There is something to learn out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Into that market. We then went to people who changed their job from working a permanent job to working a contract job and what that process looked like. More recently, it's been, okay, if you wanted to, say, be a contractor in Canada, have you spoken to an accountant? Well, we did an interview with accountants on how to, say, start a business from scratch, right? Mm-hmm. We talked to a business lawyer. If you're partnering with someone else, another contractor, right? Like, what does that look like? Right? We spoke to employment lawyers when you're finally ready to employ someone for your first business. So we've taken a few different angles, but the whole purpose is just to take the conversations that we have day to day, give that to the rest of the community so that at the very least they can follow that, and it should help them throughout their career, which is at the end of the day what we're supposed to be doing as a staffing agency, right?
I will definitely have a listen to it. Yes,
sure.
Everyone can learn something from it.
Hope so. Yeah, no, thank you.
Maurizio, Montreal Associate is an official staffing partner for major enterprises like Salesforce, SAP, and Microsoft. This requires a deep level of specialized knowledge. What does this partnership mean for delivering high impact talent, and what is your long-term vision for keeping Montreal Associate a global leader in specialist tech staffing?
So the partnerships with some of the bigger big and small, because the level of service shouldn't necessarily change, right? It should kind of transcend throughout whoever you're working with. But I think typically the larger the client that we're working with, the more that's at stake, the higher the expectations are. And if we maintain that level of service that's demanded by some of the bigger companies and show even some of the smaller players that level of service, that just brings consistency across your brand. And no matter if it's a 1-2 person startup to, thousands and thousands of people, wide company, that's super important. So no matter how your company's name is brought up in the space, you're looked at in the same light. That's super key. That's fundamental. We got to keep that going if we're going to be going anywhere. As far as growth for the future, like how are we going to stay or keep improving our position? I would argue it goes back to number one, making sure that, because you can't, we've tried, a lot of companies have tried, you can't really force a specialty. You can't just like join a market and say, I'm a specialist here. There's a lot of legwork and time that you can't cut a corner, right? You have to put in the time to become a specialist in a given area. So making sure that from a leadership perspective, we're guiding the people who work at our company to continuously become specialists in their area so that their experience compounds, instead of just, I'm a specialist today and we're going to see how that works, because it's not gonna, right? So we got to make sure that their specialism focus compounds, right? So that we can build under those people, right? And then slowly, as their business grows deeper into the vertical that they're aligned to, we will for sure open up more opportunity within that space, which can then be cross-sold into other spaces, because as much as these areas are different, they don't necessarily have to be siloed, right? And penetration into one industry or a technology sector can 100%, if used correctly, open doors elsewhere where we can then effectively do the same thing. But it just takes time. So the long-term vision around that is super important. And then our own use of technology has to continue to improve, right? At a basic level, fundamentally, it has to save time for everyone. But then we really have to start to take things to the next level, so that we can be even more competitive in the market with our service.
That's an inspiring and very ambitious vision, Maurizio. Thank you for sharing with our listeners. Now, Maurizio, if there is one key message you want Canadian SMEs, to remember about building strong tech team today, and what it would be?
I would go back to, again, you have to have a long-term vision for sure about where you want the organization to be and what kind of foundations you're setting to enable that, right? I'm the type of person where I don't ever want to have to start from scratch. I want everything I do day in and day out should help or should compound as we progress the organization forward. So just being smart about who your first hires are, right? Make sure it's a sustainable play with whatever you have to work with in your company. You may not always have the opportunity to get the best of the best of the best, but you got to be realistic with what's the best that you can do with the resources that you have, and just make sure that you're properly building on that, right? If there's no vision on how what you're doing today is going to compound, I would argue you're probably looking at problems, right? So that long-term vision, but then being very, very realistic about what you can do today to eventually get there. I think, especially, in any team probably, but in technology for sure, there's not a lot of room for error, and errors can be very expensive. I would say think about that.
Thank you so much for sharing your advice with our listeners. It has been a pleasure having you on our show today. Thank you for sharing your expertise and vision with all of us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
That was an insightful conversation with Maurizio Gioffre, Director IT Contracts and Services, Americas and Europe at Montreal Associates. Thank you for tuning into the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more expert insights and resources that can help your business thrive. You can also visit our website, CanadianSME.ca, for valuable information and tools. A special thank you to our podcast partners, UPS, A1 Global College, ADP, and Google, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses in Canada. Until next time, keep innovating and striving for success. We will see you in the next episode.